Britain gave the world some of the most famous entertainers of the 20th century. Millions welcomed them into their homes. They were trusted, admired, in some cases, even loved. But behind the fame, the awards, and the carefully crafted public image, some of those same men were hiding lives so dark that when the truth finally emerged, it shocked an entire nation. Today, we are uncovering 9 old British stars whose crimes, scandals, and disturbing secrets shattered everything their audiences believed about them. And trust me, the deeper we go, the worse it gets. This is the full story, and we're not leaving out a single detail. Gary Glitter, the glam rock monster few falls from grace in British entertainment history, have been as complete or as horrifying as Gary Glitter. Born Paul Francis Gadd in 1944, Glitter became one of the biggest stars of the glam rock era. His hit song Rock and Roll Part 2 turned him into a household name, and for years he performed to packed arenas filled with cheering fans. To the public, he was a music icon. Behind closed doors, he was something very different. The first major crack appeared in 1987 when Glitter took his computer to a repair shop in Bristol. What should have been a routine visit quickly became a criminal investigation. Technician discovered more than 4,000 images of child abuse hidden on the hard drive. Glitter was arrested, charged, and in 1999 pleaded guilty. Despite the seriousness of the offense, he served only 2 months of a 4-month sentence before walking free. For most public figures, that would have been the end. It wasn't. After his release, Glitter left Britain and moved through Cambodia and Vietnam, but the allegations followed him. In 2006, a Vietnamese court convicted him of committing obscene acts with 2 young girls, aged 10 and 11. He received a 4-year sentence, served less than 3 years, and was deported back to Britain. Then came the development that finally destroyed what remained of his reputation. In 2012, Glitter became the first person arrested under Operation U-Tree. The investigation launched after the Jimmy Savile scandal. What detectives uncovered was far worse than anyone expected, and evidence pointed to a pattern of abuse, stretching back decades. In February 2015, a jury found Glitter guilty of attempted rape, 4 counts of indecent assault, and 1 count of having sex with a girl under 13. Some of his victims were as young as 8 years old. He was sentenced to 16 years in prison. What makes this case particularly disturbing is how long it continued. Investigators and psychologists often point to a pattern seen in certain celebrity offenders, the belief that fame places them above normal consequences. Court evidence painted the picture of a man who repeatedly used status, influence, and public trust as protection, and who showed little genuine remorse across decades of offending. Even after his release in February 2023, trouble followed almost immediately. Within weeks, he was reportedly caught breaching license conditions and was recalled to prison. As of 2026, Gary Glitter remains behind bars, now in his 80s, in poor health and confined largely to a wheelchair. He has repeatedly failed to secure release. The parole board rejected his latest application in 2025. The man who once heard entire stadiums chant his name will likely spend the rest of his life in a prison cell. For many of his victims, justice arrived late, but it arrived. If this video is already making you see these celebrities differently, hit subscribe right now. Every week we uncover cases, scandals, and hidden histories that many channels won't touch, and trust me, you haven't seen the worst one yet. Gary Glitter spent decades hiding behind fame before justice finally caught up with him, but the next man on our list is different because he didn't use celebrity to escape prison. He used prison to build his celebrity. After serving time for murder, he walked out of jail, reinvented himself, and became one of the most recognizable faces on British television. His name was Leslie Grantham, and his story is almost impossible to believe. Leslie Grantham, the murderer, who became Britain's most famous villain. Some criminals spend their lives trying to escape notoriety. Leslie Grantham turned it into a television career. Born in South London in 1947, Grantham joined the Royal Fusiliers as a teenager and was stationed in West Germany. But behind the military uniform was a young man struggling with debt, gambling, and heavy drinking. Then came the decision that changed everything. On December 3rd, 1966, 19-year-old Leslie Grantham hailed a taxi in Osnabrück. The driver was Felix Rees, a 30-year-old husband and father simply trying to earn a living. During a robbery attempt, Grantham pulled a gun. Moments later, Felix Rees was dead, shot in the back of the head. Grantham was convicted of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment. For most people, that would have been the end of the story. For Leslie Grantham, it was the beginning. While serving his sentence, he discovered acting. Encouraged by prison visitor Louise Jameson, he trained professionally and developed a talent few expected. Then came the twist that still shocks people today. After serving only 10 years of a life sentence, Grantham walked free and in 1985, less than 2 decades after committing murder, he appeared on television as Den Watts, better known as Dirty Den, in EastEnders. The role made him a national star. Millions watched him every week. The BBC knew about his conviction. The public embraced him anyway, but one detail continued to haunt the case. Over the years, Grantham repeatedly said he would never apologize to the family of Felix Rees. He claimed an apology would serve no purpose. The widow and daughter of the man he killed never received a single direct acknowledgement from him. Then, in 2004, another scandal exploded. Grantham was secretly recorded engaging in explicit webcam activity from his BBC dressing room. The footage became tabloid headlines and effectively ended his television comeback. What makes the case unsettling is not simply the murder, it is how completely Grantham appeared to separate that crime from the rest of his life. Psychologists sometimes refer to this as moral detachment, the ability to compartmentalize a catastrophic act without fully confronting its consequences. Whether that description fits Grantham perfectly is impossible to know, but one fact remains: a convicted murderer became one of Britain's most recognizable television stars. Leslie Grantham died in 2018 at the age of 71, more than 50 years after Felix Rees lost his life. Before we continue, hit like and subscribe. These stories only get darker from here, and if you're still watching, you're about to hear about a man trusted by parents, loved by children, and welcomed into millions of homes for decades. A man whose downfall shocked Britain. Murderer becoming a television icon is difficult enough to understand, but the next case is even more disturbing, because this man wasn't feared, he was trusted. He entertained families, painted a portrait of the Queen, received national honors, and built a reputation so wholesome that allegations against him once seemed impossible to believe. His name was Rolf Harris, and that reputation turned out to be his greatest disguise. Rolf Harris, the nation's favorite uncle, was something else entirely for decades. Rolf Harris represented family-friendly entertainment. He sang hit songs, hosted popular television programs, painted portraits, and became one of the most recognizable figures in British culture. By the early 2000s, he was more than a celebrity. He was an institution, which is exactly why what happened next was so devastating. In 2013, Harris was arrested as part of Operation Yewtree. The investigation launched after the Jimmy Savile scandal. The following year, his trial revealed a reality completely at odds with the image millions had trusted. The jury heard evidence of abuse spanning nearly 2 decades. When the trial ended, Harris was convicted of 12 counts of indecent assault involving 4 victims. Some were just 7 or 8 years old. One of the most disturbing details involved a childhood friend of his own daughter, not a stranger, not a fan, someone who had spent time inside his family circle and trusted him completely. Prosecutors argued that Harris had benefited from something many powerful offenders rely on: credibility. Victims said they spoke out. Many simply were not believed, because this was Rolf Harris, the smiling television personality, the man who painted the Queen. The entertainer families thought they knew. His public image became a shield, and for years it worked. Forensic psychologists often describe this pattern as narcissistic entitlement, a mindset in which admiration, status, and success gradually create the belief that ordinary rules no longer apply. Whether consciously or unconsciously, the individual begins to see themselves as untouchable. The sentencing judge was blunt. He told Harris that he had abused the trust placed in him and caused lasting psychological harm to his victims. Harris received a prison sentence of 5 years and 9 months. Observers noted what appeared to be a striking lack of remorse. He was released in 2017 after serving around 3.5 years. In 2023, he died at the age of 93, yet perhaps the most powerful symbol of the entire case still remains: the official portrait he painted of Queen Elizabeth II, a reminder of the enormous gap between the public image and the reality behind it. The next story is different, because this man was not accused of hiding behind fame. He was destroyed by it. As a child star, John Alford became one of the faces of Britain's most famous anti-drug campaign. Millions of young people watched him tell them to stay away from drugs. The irony? While that campaign was making headlines, his own life was already beginning to spiral out of control. And decades later, that downward spiral would end in the darkest way imaginable. This is the story of John Alford. John Alford, the anti-drug hero who could not save himself. John Alford spent years telling young people how to avoid destroying their lives. In the end, he could not save his own. Born John James Shannon in Glasgow in 1971, Alford entered the entertainment industry at an early age and quickly became one of Britain's most recognizable child actors. His breakthrough came in Grange Hill, where he played Robbie Wright, and became a favorite among young viewers across the country. Then came the moment that would define the irony of his entire life. In 1986, the Grange Hill cast released Just Say No, an anti-drug single that became a major success. The campaign took Alford to the White House, brought him face-to-face with Princess Diana, and turned him into one of the public faces of Britain's anti-drug message. Millions of children saw him as an example to follow. What they did not know was that a very different story was unfolding behind the scenes. Years later, Alford admitted that during those same teenage years he was drinking extraordinary amounts of alcohol, up to 18 bottles of beer and 9 shots of spirits a night. 18 bottles, 9 shots every night, the boy telling children to stay away from destructive habits was already struggling with his career continued to grow. After leaving Grange Hill, he landed a major role in London's Burning, became a teen idol, and even enjoyed success in music. From the outside, everything appeared to be working. Then it all collapsed. In 1997, undercover journalist Mazhar Mahmood, the infamous fake sheikh, recorded Alford supplying cocaine and cannabis. The scandal destroyed his career almost overnight. In 1999, he was convicted of supplying Class A drugs, sentenced to prison, and dismissed from London's Burning. The public image he had spent years building vanished in a single day. What followed was a slow and painful decline. He worked a series of ordinary jobs. He was convicted of drink driving. Financial problems mounted. Then came a moment that many people still remember. In 2018, police body camera footage captured Alford sitting in a council bin lorry, apparently intoxicated, shouting bizarre accusations at officers and claiming powerful media figures were conspiring against him. For many viewers, it was difficult to watch. A former child star had become almost unrecognizable, but the darkest chapter was still ahead. In April 2022, Alford attended a gathering in Hertfordshire where 2 teenage girls were present. Prosecutors later told the court that he bought alcohol for the girls before sexually assaulting them. One was 14 years old, other was 15. The case eventually reached St Albans Crown Court. Alford denied the allegations and insisted he was innocent. The jury disagreed. He was found guilty on all 6 counts, according to reports from the courtroom. Sobbing could be heard from the public gallery as the verdicts were delivered. On January 14, 2026, he was sentenced to 8.5 years in prison. The judge told him his actions had caused serious and lasting harm to the victims. What makes this story particularly tragic is the pattern behind it. Researchers often describe similar cases as a form of identity collapse, i.e., a process in which a person loses the role that once defined them and gradually spirals into increasingly reckless and destructive behavior. Whether that fully explains Alford's actions is impossible to know, but the decline is undeniable. And then came the final twist. On March 13, 2026, just 2 months after his sentencing, prison staff at HMP Bureau found John Alford unresponsive in his cell. He was 54 years old. The cause of death was never officially confirmed. The boy who once stood in front of cameras telling a generation of children to just say no died in prison, convicted of crimes against children. His story began with a public campaign about responsibility. It ended with a conviction, a prison sentence, and a cell door that never opened again. John Alford's downfall was painfully public. The world watched a child star lose everything. Max Clifford was not a performer. He was not a pop star or a game show host. He was something more powerful than either. He was the man those people called when their world was falling apart. For 50 years, Max Clifford was Britain's most feared and most sought-after public relations professional. His client list was a who's who of British and international celebrity: Simon Cowell, David Beckham, Muhammad Ali, Diana Ross. He was the man who broke the story of politician David Mellor's affair. He was the man who sold the "Freddie Star Ate My Hamster" headline to The Sun. He shaped what you read about powerful people. He controlled the narrative. He was, and this phrase is almost unbearably ironic in retrospect, the keeper of secrets. In April 2014, at Southwark Crown Court, Max Clifford was convicted of 8 counts of indecent assault against women and girls as young as 15. The offences spanned the period from 1977 to 1984. He was sentenced to 8 years in prison. He was the first person convicted as part of Operation U-Tree. What prosecutors described in court was a man who had used his London office as, in their phrase, a sexual fiefdom. He lured young girls with promises of acting roles, including a claimed connection to the American soap opera Dynasty. He impersonated Hollywood figures to gain access. He used the most powerful currency he possessed, access, influence, the ability to make or destroy a career, as a direct instrument of coercion. One child protection official called him a ruthless and manipulative sex offender. Clifford denied everything. He called his accusers fantasists. He appealed his conviction. He died in Littlehay Prison in December 2017 of a heart attack while serving his sentence. The Court of Appeal, reviewing his case after his death, upheld his convictions entirely. The presiding judge, Lady Justice Rafferty, described the case against him as strong and dismissed the appeal in full. The man who spent 50 years managing other people's reputations spent the last years of his life unable to manage his own. Power, influence, the ease, ability to make scandals disappear. Max Clifford built an empire on all three, but the next man on our list is different. He wasn't feared, he was loved. For millions of Britons, he was the grumpy old comedian who made them laugh every week. Yet behind that familiar face was a private life filled with secrecy, isolation, and personal turmoil. This is the story of Wilfrid Brambell. Wilfrid Brambell, the dirty old man, was not acting for millions of viewers. Wilfrid Brambell was Albert Steptoe, the scruffy coat, the rasping voice, the permanently irritated expression. As the star of Steptoe and Son, he became one of the most recognizable faces on British television. At its peak, the program attracted nearly 28 million viewers. Brambell wasn't simply famous, he was part of British culture. He even appeared alongside the Beatles in A Hard Day's Night, ensuring that his face was known in homes across the country. But away from the cameras, his life looked very different. Born in Dublin in 1912, Brambell lived during a period when homosexuality was criminalized in Britain and could destroy careers overnight. He briefly married in 1948, but the marriage ended in divorce a few years later. As time passed, he became increasingly private and increasingly dependent on alcohol. Then came the incident that nearly ended everything. In November 1962, while at the height of his fame, Brambell was arrested in West London and charged under laws that criminalized homosexual solicitation. The case immediately created panic behind the scenes at the BBC. Executives feared the scandal could destroy one of their biggest stars and threatened the future of Steptoe and Son, according to accounts from the time. Producers even discussed gauging audience reaction before deciding whether Brambell should remain on the program. That was how serious the situation had become. In December 1962, he appeared in court. He denied the charge. The court ultimately found the offense proven and issued a 12-month conditional discharge. For many celebrities, a scandal like that would have ended a career. For Brambell, somehow it didn't. The audience continued to support him. The show survived, and his career carried on, but the pressure never truly disappeared. Friends and biographers later described a man who spent much of his life hiding parts of himself, struggling with loneliness, and relying increasingly on alcohol. Years after his death, unproven allegations emerged linking him to historical abuse claims. Those allegations were never tested in court, and Brambell was never able to respond to them. What is documented, however, is the personal decline that marked his later years. The fame remained, the success remained, but behind the public image was a man becoming increasingly isolated. When Wilfrid Brambell died of cancer in 1985, he was 73 years old. Only a small number of people attended his funeral. It was a lonely ending for a man who had once entertained almost half the country. His story is not remembered because of power or influence. It is remembered because it reveals how dramatically a public image can differ from a private life. The man who spent decades making Britain laugh was, by many accounts, fighting battles that almost nobody could see. A man trapped by secrecy, loneliness, and a changing hero. Wilfrid Brambell's story was one of private struggles, hidden behind public laughter. But our next case is the complete opposite. A man famous for elegance, sophistication, charm, a television icon who convinced millions. He was the ultimate ladies' man. Women adored him. The media celebrated him. Britain could not get enough of him. But behind that carefully crafted image was a secret life that could destroy everything. And in 1975, one night in a provincial bus station toilet brought the entire illusion crashing down. This is the story of Peter Wyngarde. Peter Wyngarde, the most glamorous man in Britain was living a lie in the early 1970s, Peter Wyngarde seemed to have everything: fame, wealth, influence. As Jason King, he became one of the most recognizable faces on British television. Women adored him. Television executives loved him. When he toured Australia, tens of thousands of fans turned up to see him. At the height of his fame, Peter Wyngarde was not just a television star, he was a phenomenon. But behind the tailored suits, the charm, and the carefully crafted image was a secret life that few people knew existed. And in 1975, that secret exploded into public view. Wyngarde had overcome hardships most people could barely imagine. As a child during the Second World War, he was interned by the Japanese in Shanghai. He witnessed brutality firsthand and spent years recovering from illness and malnutrition after the war. Against all odds, he rebuilt his life and transformed himself into one of Britain's biggest stars. Then came the night that changed everything. In 1975, Peter Wyngarde was arrested in the public lavatories of Gloucester bus station and charged with an act of gross indecency involving a lorry driver. The story dominated headlines. The humiliation was immediate, and there was one detail that made it even worse. He was prosecuted under his real name, Cyril Louis Goldbert. Many of his fans had never even heard that name before. He pleaded guilty and was fined £75. But here is the twist: most people never knew this was not his first encounter with police. The previous year, he had reportedly been cautioned for similar behavior in Birmingham. For years, rumors had circulated quietly behind the scenes. When the conviction became public, the illusion shattered overnight. Jason King was supposed to be the ultimate ladies' man, sophisticated, stylish, irresistible. Now, the public was seeing a very different reality, and his career never truly recovered. What emerged later made the story even more tragic. According to later biographies, Wyngarde had spent years hiding his sexuality during a period when being openly gay could destroy a public career. He was reportedly involved in a long-term relationship with actor Alan Bates, but that relationship remained hidden from the public. The glamorous, womanizing image that made him famous was, in many ways, a performance, a role he was playing long after the cameras stopped rolling. After the scandal, Wyngarde struggled with alcohol and watched his career slowly fade. The leading roles disappeared, the fame disappeared, the public moved on. By the 1980s and 1990s, he was appearing only occasionally in smaller productions. He died in January 2018 at the age of 90. Psychologists often describe the lives of closeted public figures from that era as a form of chronic internal conflict. One identity for the public, another for private life. The greater the gap between those two worlds, the greater the pressure becomes. Peter Wyngarde spent decades maintaining an image that millions believed. And in the end, it was not the performance that destroyed him, it was the distance between the performance and the truth. Oliver Reed, Britain's most dangerous actor. Some actors played dangerous men, Oliver. Reed barely seemed to be acting. By the late 1960s, Reed had become one of Britain's biggest film stars. His performances in Oliver, Women in Love and The Devils made him famous for playing intense, unpredictable characters. The remarkable thing was how closely that image matched his real life. Long before he became a star, Reed had built a reputation for fighting, drinking, and taking risks that most people would avoid. Friends admired it, journalists celebrated it, audiences were fascinated by it. But behind the mythology was a man slowly destroying himself. Alcohol became the center of Reed's life. Not an occasional vice, not a bad habit, a way of living. His name became linked to legendary drinking sessions, public fights, destroyed hotel rooms, and behavior that repeatedly crossed the line between entertaining and dangerous. The stories became so common that they started to define him, and that was part of the problem. The wild man image made great headlines. The reality was much darker. Throughout his life, Reed was involved in numerous violent incidents. Early in his career, a serious bar fight left him needing more than 60 stitches to his face and permanently scarred him. The injury became part of his image. The scar looked tough, the damage behind it was real. Co-stars often described him as physically intimidating, unpredictable, and sometimes difficult to control. Even people who liked him admitted he could be reckless. What makes Oliver Reed's story unusual is that many of those closest to him believed the chaos was masking something deeper. Biographers and friends later described a man struggling with unhappiness, regret, and severe alcoholism. The public saw confidence. Those around him often saw self-destruction. As the years passed, the drinking worsened. The incidents continued, and the gap between the legend and the reality became harder to ignore. Then came the ending that seemed almost inevitable. In 1999, while filming Gladiator in Malta, Reed reportedly returned to heavy drinking after a period of sobriety. On his final day, he spent hours drinking with sailors in a local bar. Later that evening, he suffered a massive heart attack. He was 61 years old. His death came before filming was complete, forcing the production to finish his remaining scenes using a body double and digital effects. Oliver Reed spent decades building the image of a man who lived without limits. In the end, those limits caught up with him. The world remembers the stories, the fights, the drinking, the larger-than-life personality, but beneath the legend was a man whose greatest battle was not with anyone else, it was with himself. William Roache is the longest-serving cast member in the world's longest-running soap opera. He has played Ken Barlow in Coronation Street since the first episode broadcast on December 9th, 1960. He holds a Guinness World Record. His colleagues, including the late Anne Kirkbride and Helen Worth, testified at his trial to describe him as a perfect gentleman and a father figure. In May 2013, William Roache was arrested on suspicion of rape. He was subsequently charged with 2 counts of rape and 4 counts of indecent assault, relating to 5 women, all of whom had been 16 or under at the alleged time of the offenses, between 1965 and 1971. In February 2014, after a 3.5-week trial at Preston Crown Court, a jury found William Roache not guilty of all charges. He was acquitted. He returned to Coronation Street. William Roache is legally an innocent man. That verdict stands. That verdict must stand. What this case does document, and what belongs in any honest accounting of this era, is the scale of the accusation, the culture from which it emerged, and what it reveals about the climate of the 1970s. British entertainment world. 5 women came forward. 5 women who had carried their accounts for 40 years. They were not believed by a jury. That is the legal verdict, and it must be respected. But the women who came forward also deserve a record that they existed, that they spoke, and that the system heard them and reached its conclusion through due process. This is not a conviction. It is a context, and context matters. A man tried and acquitted by the legal system. That is how the law works. These men were trusted, respected, and loved, but behind closed doors, and sometimes in plain sight, they were something else entirely. Which case shocked you the most? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want to see more cases like these, watch this video next.